Hey everybody, as promised, a 113 match on Stalingrad, played by Torb, platoon with Elite Cake and Krakus, on the EU server. So the 113, not a very popular tank. There was a brief flurry of interest in it when it was first announced because it looked like it was going to be an IS-7 pretty much with the IS-4's gun. Its gun is an M62 clone, which is something that I've always been interested in. I wish that the IS-7 had a gun choice with the M62 on it, because although the S70 is a decent gun, the M62 is a better gun. With that said, there are a couple differences with the IS-7, obviously. Although the hull shape is very similar, it has the same low profile, the same kind of tapered back edges. It doesn't have a pike, it just has a very sharply sloped upper front plate. The angle on that upper plate is actually fairly amusing. It gets all kinds of bounces that technically you wouldn't think it would get. I can't remember offhand the thickness of that armor, but it's thick enough, put it that way. The lower plate also pretty well sloped, very well sloped in fact, and the whole profile of the hull is very, very thin, very not deep, put it that way. The depth of the hull is quite low, so shooting at it from a full broadside profile shot, you have a pretty good chance of missing over or under the hull. To add to that, you can actually see the weld joints along the side armor, where, just like the IS-7, the 113 has spaced armor. So it is a bitch to pen, perhaps not quite as much of a bitch as the IS-7, which still has the much slopier turret and the pike, but very similar. The 113 also boasts pretty good mobility, as you can see here. Definitely better than the IS-7's. The IS-7, of course, on paper has very good speed, but in practice it's absolutely dog shit. Terrain resistance lets it down. The IS-7 very rarely sees its top speed and doesn't turn well, and the worse the terrain gets, the worse the IS-7's handling gets. Of course, being an M62 clone, the 113's gun is a bit more accurate and a bit better at penning things than you expect from the IS-7's S70 or the Wheezy 111's S70 clone. Here we can see Torb putting a nice pair of shots into the AMX there, one through a wall, which I guess the AMX didn't think would happen somehow. And now he gets some into an IS-8. That was actually very much on the edge of the pike there. I'm surprised that went through. He takes a little more careful aim this time, and that one was well and truly a meaty shot into the exposed side of the pike, killing the IS-8. The position that Torb's in here is very strong for the 113 because his side is pretty much covered by rubble, but his front was presenting just a completely untenable angle to the enemy tanks. And here's something you don't see every day, something pushing an E75 and actually scaring it away. The E75, I would say, is a better tank than the 113 for general purposes, but the 113 is certainly capable of giving it problems. Of course, when I say it's a better tank, I mean as much as a tier 9 can be better than a tier 10. It's better for tier, I mean, not outright better, because that's a bit ridiculous. Sorry, I should have cleared that up earlier. Either way, things are getting pretty tense. It's looking fairly even here. The west side of the map is now under friendly control, but the east side is still pretty much wild, where the remaining enemy tanks have retreated to and actually have begun pushing down the east side towards the friendly base. And here we see the mobility of this tank in action. It's not hitting the kind of speed an IS-7 should be able to hit. It certainly can hit going down a slope, not downstairs. But it's maintaining a pretty good speed over road, over dirt, over rubble. The 113 is just a good sort of general mobility tank. It's not something that says it's good and then isn't. Unfortunately, Krakus wasn't able to finish the E100 there, but the IS-8 was. The Conqueror has got himself badly cut off in enemy territory. He's fucked. There's nothing that could have been done there except him not driving off alone. And so now things are looking pretty grim. Torb still has most of his hit points though, and he still has a pretty solid heavy tank. So he's going to take it and he's going to do something decisive. Obviously he needs a little thinking time to try and work out where he wants to go, coordinate things with Krakus, and try and herd the IS-8 where he wants it to go as well. Puppy shepherding is a very difficult, arcane skill. It's almost a lost art. Very few people can do it. Goon shepherding is even harder. Krakus tells the IS-8 to come to them to avoid the same fate as the Conqueror. It is not a good idea to separate yourself out from your teammates when there's this kind of situation and you're outnumbered. Or even if the numbers are equal or in your favour, it's not a good idea to separate out. Even if it means ceding map control to the enemy, it's better to stay in a blob, which gives you the advantage of numbers, gives you a big, healthy blob of hit points to chew through, and gives you a bunch of guns, all aiming at the same thing. 212 is going to have to fend for himself here. Unfortunately, the Leopard polishes him off before he can actually even spot it. Krakus and the IS-8 hang back a bit, while Torb, with all his hit points and armor, scouts ahead. Carefully positions himself to try and get a shot to the Waffenträger without taking damage. He baits the first shot successfully, bounced off the armor, and he's not going to chance playing corner games with it, because eventually it will probably pen him and then he'll be in a world of hurt. Meanwhile, Krakus works his way around and the IS-8 kind of mills around aimlessly. The IS-8 gets brave and pushes the corner, which is not a good plan, but either way, Torb is busy driving down here. I think the purpose of him coming down here was to try and slip around the back of the Waffenträger without being spotted, but in fact, he's also found the enemy M53 while he was at it, which is a nice bonus. M53's already blown his load way too early. Although Torb is a little hesitant about pushing him. Not quite sure why he hesitated there. Obviously it's on reload, but everyone does it, I do it, so I'm not going to criticize. Sometimes it takes you a few seconds to catch up to what's actually going on in a match. Often it takes me whole minutes, because things in this game just happen so quickly. This is not a game for slow people. I don't mean that in an offensive way, I mean if you prefer slower paced games. I'm kind of borderline, this is about as fast as I get. More typically I'm a sort of tactical shooter player, Red Orchestra, Armor, stuff like that. Slow games that take a lot of thinking. World of Tanks is about my speed limit. The moment I try and play anything like Counter-Strike or Quake or any of that, I just fall apart. Cannot do Twitch shooters. Anyway, we now have a situation where Krakus has gone down. It's just Torb and the IS-8, and they have two mediums to deal with. The two mediums on the enemy team have made a good account for themselves so far, particularly the 140. The IS-8 gets a hit into the Leopard there, but he's inevitably going to die. He's fighting two mediums in the middle of an open street. Torb, unfortunately, just snapshots a little too late and hits the back of Krakus's turret. But he's able to cross the street without getting hit, which is a bonus. So he's now got to deal with two very agile, very high pen medium tanks that will pick him apart in seconds if he lets them, and he's got to do it alone. Thankfully he does have most of his hit points, he does have one of the better armoured tanks in the game, but it's not necessarily enough to guarantee victory, especially when the enemy mediums do this. They're just alternating, popping out around corners, forcing Torb to look one way or the other, and then whoever he's not looking at rolls out and shoots him. Classic strategy. This is why, if you can avoid it, you don't want to let 2 or more enemy tanks single you out. You need to have teammates nearby, or you need to have something that can screen you from at least one of them, so you can deal with the other comfortably without being hit. Torb stops behind the wall. Now, I'm just going to quickly pause this to show what he's doing here. He's positioned himself behind the wall so that the 140 has to drive all the way around, proxy lighting himself to shoot Torb in the side. Meanwhile, Torb, because he's scraped in like this, can easily roll backwards and be in a side scrape position against the 140 should it elect to do that. He is battleshipping to the Leopard, but at this point it doesn't really matter. The Leopard is one-shottable if it rolls out to take a shot at Torb. Unless he misses, the Leopard's going to go down before it can get off a second shot. All the while, he's pre-aiming the Leopard, knowing that if the 140 does push on him, he's going to proxy spot it as it comes around this building, and he will have the time to react. Just a little thing there, you know, in case you would have missed it otherwise, there is actually a reason he's pulled in behind this house and he's doing what he's doing. Things like this are things that you need to be able to do on the fly. And it's another one of those things that, you know, I've talked about how terrain use and situational awareness separate average players from great players. The ability to position your tank according to the situation on a sort of, not a terrain sort of level, but the actual facing of your armor and your gun is also very important. And if you watch a really, really good player, like, say, any goon that's blue or purple and isn't me, for instance, and also Hardest had a couple of really good stream highlights up where he was doing this, you can actually watch them constantly shifting the position of their hull and their turret to either scare enemy tanks and sort of discourage them from pushing, or to bounce incoming hits from multiple directions. Now, in Hardest case, I've seen him do it in the E5. He was actually bouncing fire from about 3 different directions in a very short amount of time, simply because he knew how to position his hull and turret to intercept it. It takes very quick reflexes and very, very well-tuned situational awareness. It's very hard to do, and then to add on the fact that you're trying to put out damage at the same time, it can be too much for most people, me included. But to actually see it in action is pretty nice. So I'm going to stop ranting now and go back to the actual match. As I said, 140 rolls out, lights himself, puts in a tracking shot because Torb was side-scraped, all according to plan. He does unfortunately get a penning shot through there though, because Torb was angling just a little too steeply. And now this is where things start to fall apart. Luckily, Torb gets back into cover before the Leopard can get the killing shot off, but he still has 2 mediums fighting him. Both one-shottable. The Leopard's already aimed at him. If that Leopard gets a hit on him and it pens, Torb's dead. And the 140, if we look, isn't quite aiming at him, but no doubt by the time he rolls around that corner he'll have his gun out. So it becomes a question of who do we aim for and how do we position. And I'm actually going to do this zoomed out in third-person free camera so you can see how Torb is positioning to survive this. He aims at the 140 to discourage it, sees the Leopard, knows that the Leopard's going to back off, so as the Leopard backs out, he recommits to the 140, which is important because the 140, as far as the 140 drive is concerned, Torb has taken the Leopard's bait, but no, he actually hasn't, and so mid-traverse, he reverses his turret back at the 140, picks it off before it can react, and now it's just the Leopard. Again, you have to be able to think very, very quickly on your feet. It's very difficult to do. So we're back into the fixed camera now, watching from Torb's actual camera inputs, and now he's got to try and figure out a way of surviving this situation. The Leopard could pop out either side. The Leopard is very quick, so there's a good chance that it would be able to do it before Torb can react, and the Leopard may or may not pen him. At this point, Torb's hull armor is good enough to get some absolutely bullshit bounces, but it's not reliable enough to bet a game on. And so Torb backs up. The Leopard can no longer see where he is, but it works both ways. Torb now no longer knows which direction the Leopard's moving, which side it's favouring. So he zooms all the way out to give himself the maximum warning of the Leopard's movement, so he can see no matter which side it pops out, he can easily lay his gun onto it. This is why zooming in to to like 30 or 40 power magnification is not always a good plan. He backs out. He now has, just to point this out, this chimney here on his right side between him and the leopard. So that's, I'm not sure if he actually did that intentionally or not, but he now has at least some degree of cover on his right side. And if we actually look just to the right of the chimney, the wreck there of the other Waffenträger, the enemy Waffenträger, is also in the way. So if the leopard tries to get a shot through there, he's only got a very, very small margin to do it through. He will have to take the shot from there, or drive all the way around, risking a side shot there from Torb as he drives past. Yeah, not worth it. So more likely than not, the leopard will pop out this side. Let's see what happens. Torb's now on cap, so he's forcing the leopard to move. The leopard makes a commitment to push up to the next building. Torb's not quick enough to get him. Thankfully he doesn't fire, because if that had gone into a wall he would now be dead. But he keeps his gun once again in the center of the leopard's two options, zoomed out so he can see where the leopard's going and react accordingly. The leopard, for his part, is obviously trying to figure out what to do, otherwise he would have charged in by now. He knows that he's got some time to play with, he's just trying to make up his mind. He goes back to his original position, interestingly enough. I'm not sure why he did that, because if we look at the leopard's positioning now, what I would have done, just bring up my full screen map, the leopard was behind this building, behind this building, correction, and now he's moved in behind here. Now, the problem is, as he moved down there, the leopard lit himself crossing that gap, which he should have known was going to happen, because he knows that Torb can see through it. That's the whole reason he didn't pop out to shoot before. The leopard didn't want to get hit between that gap, but he obviously didn't care to get lit through it. Didn't care enough to avoid getting lit through it. What he should have done, and this is, from a sort of theory crafting perspective, I don't know if I actually would have done any differently under the sort of heat of the moment, but what the leopard should have done was, knowing Torb's position, knowing Torb's sight line, and the fact that that building creates a blind spot diagonally southeast for him, the leopard should have pulled away to the southeast, quickly doglegged around that corner, and then he would have any number of options for dealing with Torb. He could have gone all the way around here. The leopard's fast, he would have had time to do it. Arguably, he could have done this earlier. There's no need at all to sit on a point where you know that, where the enemy knows you are, and you obviously know the enemy knows you are. Don't do it. It's narrowing down your options, and it makes it easier for him to get a shot into you. It gives him a much higher probability of a hit. If you could be coming up, say, 3 or 4 different directions, or you're on either side of a building, it's a big difference. You're halving your options if you got 4 directions you could come in from, and you just stay behind the same building. You've only got 2 now. So, mistake there on the part of the leopard. And of course, Torb just resumes doing what he's doing before. He has a pretty good idea the leopard's going to come out the left side, so he pre-aims it. Sure enough, predictable. Very tense game, very well played. The enemy leopard did try, but just the end there. You don't stay in a position that the enemy knows you're in. It just doesn't make sense. And if you watch a lot of replays of really, really good players, and even some of mine where I'm not completely fucking up and throwing games, you can see people who know what they're doing, to at least some extent, will run away and go the whole other side of the map and approach from a different direction. You never want to approach from a direction either yourself or a teammate was just spotted in, because somebody invariably is pre-aimed in that direction. You need to approach from somewhere they don't think there are any tanks. And, especially in the case of people with XVM, they will have a map marker showing that you were last spotted in that position. Sorry, no, I'm wrong. Everybody now will have that if they have it turned on in their game options, because that's now an official feature in World of Tanks. It was added in 9.5. So because they know where you were last seen, you need to not be there, or not be coming from there, essentially. I hope I've explained that in a way that makes sense. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at the 113. You know, I'm not really technically proficient with video editing, and I don't have the spare time to do big hour-long narrated things. I certainly don't have the internet to upload those, but I do like to sort of do quick trials by fire of tanks, if you will, just demonstrations of how they perform in an actual battle. If you want to see the stats of a tank or what its armor layout's like, there are other YouTube channels that are better suited to that. You've probably watched at least a few of them already. And in fact, most of them incorporate battles too, but I like to just do quick looks, showing off a bit of the tank and a bit of the player as well, because that's kind of my shtick. Anyway, I'm going to go now because I've got a friend coming over for drinks. This is the last 9.4 replay I've got to upload, the last replay from either myself or anybody else, so that's done. Goodbye 9.4. And I'm actually going to go right now and patch 9.5, so I'll be able to get some more games in, and inevitably sometime around December 2017, when this actually finally gets uploaded and made public, you'll be able to watch me play World of Tanks, if the game even still exists by that point. We'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I wish you the best of luck in the field, as always, and I'll see you next time.